Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we travel back to a time when myths shaped how people saw the world, and gods walked among mortals. The Trojan War is often remembered for heroes, clever tricks, and tragic endings. Yet behind it all stood a power greater than any warrior. That power was Zeus, king of the gods, keeper of order, the one who balanced the ambitions of both mortals and immortals. Zeus did not fight with sword or shield. He ruled with thunder, silence, and the weight of destiny. Every choice he made or refused to make shifted the path of the war. His presence was felt even when unseen. The Trojan War was more than a clash of armies. It was a stage where Zeus allowed fate itself to unfold. So come closer. Listen well. This is the story of Zeus and his quiet, powerful hand in the Trojan War. Before we enter the heart of the Trojan War, we must pause and set the stage. To see Zeus's hand, we must first see the world of heroes, kingdoms, and gods in which this tale was born. The Trojan War is one of the greatest stories of ancient Greece, told in song and poem for centuries. It is more than a war. It is a myth that reflects hope, pride, and belief. This was a world where mortals and gods walked side by side. Men made choices, yet often their choices were shaped or restrained by forces beyond their own will. At the center of this myth stood Troy, a shining city on the coast of Asia Minor, famed for its wealth, its strong walls, and the wisdom of its king, Priam. To the Greeks, Troy was more than stone walls and golden halls. It was a rival of legend, a city worthy of heroes whose names would echo through time. The Greeks, or Achaeans, came from many lands. They were united not by empire, but by cause, to follow their kings, their honor, and their destinies. Agamemnon ruled Mycenae, Menelaus Sparta, Odysseus Ithaca, and Achilles was the son of a sea goddess. Each bore his own pride and his own fate. The war's spark was not greed or conquest. Myth tells of a quarrel among the gods, born at a wedding with a golden apple marked asterisk for the fairest. Asterisk. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed the apple. They turned to Zeus to decide who was most beautiful, but Zeus refused to take sides. Zeus knew such a choice would mean endless rivalry and strife. He passed the judgment to a mortal, Paris, Prince of Troy. Paris chose Aphrodite. In return, she promised him the love of the most beautiful woman on earth, Helen, Queen of Sparta. Helen's departure with Paris set the Greek kingdoms aflame. It was the spark that sent ships across the sea and armies to Troy's gates. Mortals remembered Helen's face, the walls of Troy, and the fleets of Greece. But behind it all was Zeus, guiding events from Olympus. His refusal to choose among the goddesses was no weakness. It was strategy. He allowed mortals to act, and through them, fate would play its part. He did not force the war into being, yet he did not prevent it either. He simply let destiny unfold. This is the world of the Trojan War. Heroes rising, gods stirring, kingdoms preparing, and Zeus watching, the balance of fate in his hands. Picture Troy gleaming on its hill. Picture the Greeks readying their ships. Picture the gods whispering in the halls of Olympus. And above them all, Zeus sits in silence. He weighs the scales of destiny and lets the first threads of war take shape. Here the story begins. The story of Zeus, not as a warrior, but as the guardian of order in the greatest war of myth. To understand the Trojan War, we must look at Zeus, the king of the gods. His power was not in weapons, but in shaping order, balance, and the destiny of gods and mortals. Zeus was the son of Cronus and Rhea. He rose to power not only by strength, but also by wisdom, courage, and the loyalty of his allies. He built a new order for heaven and earth. When he overthrew Cronus, Zeus became more than a victor. He became the ruler who balanced sky, land, and sea, holding together the fragile harmony of the world. From his throne on Mount Olympus, Zeus was called the father of gods and men. His rule stretched over storms, laws, oaths, and the sacred order of human life. Zeus was not perfect. He could be moved by pride or passion. Yet, unlike many gods, he often thought in terms of fate, of what must be, not only what he desired. This gave him a unique role in the Trojan War. While Hera and Athena chose the Greeks, and Aphrodite and Apollo chose Troy, Zeus tried to rise above sides. To the Greeks, fate was a thread spun by the fates. Even Zeus could not cut it. Yet he could shape how it played out, guiding events to their destined end. For mortals, Zeus was both protector and judge. Kings swore oaths in his name. Armies prayed to him for safe passage. His thunder and eagles were read as signs. Zeus also ruled the bonds of life itself. Hospitality, justice, fairness, and trust were his domain. In a war born of broken oaths, his presence was inevitable. Picture him on Olympus, seated in clouds. Around him, gods argue, Hera demands. Athena insists. Aphrodite smiles. Apollo whispers. Zeus listens in silence. His silence is strength, not weakness. By waiting, by not choosing too soon, Zeus lets the war unfold, as destiny intended. He knows Troy must fall, but in its time. Zeus is like a guardian of the storm. He does not stop the winds, but he makes sure the ship of fate sails toward the shore it was meant to reach. In the Trojan War, Zeus is not a fighter, but a ruler. He does not strike blows, but he balances the scales, allowing the story to move forward. His greatest strength is not only thunder, it is vision, patience, and trust in fate. He is vast as the sky, distant, yet always present in the story. So remember this: Zeus may not be the loudest voice in the Trojan War, but without him, the tale would lose its order, its balance, and its destiny. Every great war has a beginning. The Trojan War began not with soldiers, but with a quarrel, a golden apple, and the discord it brought among the gods. It began with a wedding. Peleus, a mortal, was to marry Thetis, a sea goddess. Zeus blessed this union to guide fate, for Thetis's child was destined to be greater than his father. The wedding was grand. All the gods were invited. Music filled the hall. Tables overflowed with ambrosia and nectar, and every seat shone with divine laughter. But one goddess was not welcome, Eris, goddess of strife. She thrived on quarrels, and so the gods left her out. Angered, she arrived anyway, carrying a golden apple. On the apple were the words, "For the fairest." She tossed it into the feast, and joy gave way to tension as it rolled across the shining floor. 3 goddesses reached for it: Hera, the queen; Athena, the wise warrior; Aphrodite, radiant with beauty. Each claimed the apple. Each insisted she was the fairest. Their dispute grew fierce. Hera demanded it, as her right as queen. Athena argued for her wisdom and valor. Aphrodite offered her unmatched beauty. The gods stood still. None dared to choose, for to favor one meant to anger the other 2. So they turned to Zeus, king of the gods. Zeus knew the danger. He refused to decide. Even he, with thunder in his hands, would not risk the wrath of 2 scorned goddesses. Instead, Zeus passed the choice to a mortal. The apple would be judged not on Olympus, but in the hands of Paris, Prince of Troy. Paris was known for fairness. Once, he had judged a contest of bulls, honestly, even against divine favor. For this, he was chosen to decide. Each goddess sought to sway him. Hera promised power and kingship. Athena offered wisdom and victory. Aphrodite promised love, the love of the most beautiful woman. Paris chose Aphrodite. He placed the apple in her hand. With that choice, fate shifted, and the path to Troy's war began. The woman Aphrodite promised was Helen of Sparta, wife of King Menelaus. Her love for Paris would carry her to Troy and set Greece aflame. Thus, the spark of war was lit. Armies would rise, ships would sail, and Troy would face its destiny, all from the apple of discord. And Zeus? His refusal was wisdom. By staying silent, he let mortals act, and through them, fate moved forward. The apple was not just a fruit, it was a seed of destiny, and Zeus, though distant, allowed it to grow into the story we remember. The Trojan War began not with swords, but with pride, beauty, and the quiet choice of Zeus to let the tale unfold. Before ships sailed to Troy, before walls shook, there was an oath sworn by kings and princes, an oath that bound Greece to one cause. The story begins in Sparta. Helen, daughter of Zeus and Leda, was famed as the most beautiful woman alive. Suitors came from across Greece to claim her hand. Tyndareus, Helen's father, faced a heavy choice. To pick one suitor was to offend all the others. And kings do not forgive insults lightly. Among the suitors were mighty names: Odysseus, clever and sharp; Ajax, strong and proud; Menelaus, ambitious brother of Agamemnon. Many others stood waiting. The palace trembled with rivalry. Tyndareus feared that his decision could spark war among Greece's greatest men, right in his own hall. Then came Odysseus with cunning. He had no desire for Helen, for his heart leaned toward Penelope. Instead, he offered wisdom in exchange for support. Odysseus proposed an oath. Every suitor must swear to protect the chosen husband. If anyone broke the marriage, all would unite in defense. Tyndareus agreed. The plan was brilliant. Rivals would become allies, and no man could betray the choice without facing all of Greece. Sacrifices were made. The oath was sworn. Each suitor pledged, by the gods above and by Zeus himself, to honor Helen's marriage forever. At last, Helen was given to Menelaus. The matter seemed settled. The suitors departed, and life returned to quiet. Yet the oath remained. For oaths do not die. They sleep, waiting. And years later, when Paris arrived in Sparta, destiny stirred. Aphrodite's promise pulled him to Helen. Paris carried Helen to Troy. In that moment, the oath of Tyndareus awoke. What was once peace became a call to war. Menelaus cried out to the kings of Greece. He reminded them of their promise. Bound by honor, one by one, they answered his call. Ships were built. Warriors gathered. Across the Aegean, Greece rose as one, united not by choice, but by the power of a sworn oath. And in this, Zeus's presence lingered. The oath was spoken in his name. The chain of destiny that bound men to war was sealed under his witness. Without the oath, Menelaus might have stood alone. With it, the war became inevitable. It would be fought not by one, but by many. The oath was more than words. It was an invisible chain, forged by pride, bound by Zeus, and destined to ignite the greatest war of legend. Once the oath of Tyndareus awoke, Greece could not rest. The suitors who once sought Helen now had to fight for her return. The great gathering of kings began. Messengers traveled far and wide. From palace to palace, island to island, they carried the call. Remember your oath. Helen has been taken. Come, defend your honor. One by one, the kings answered. Some came with eagerness, hungry for glory. Others came with heavy hearts, knowing war's cost. Yet all were bound by sworn promise. Agamemnon of Mycenae stepped forward. Brother of Menelaus, proud and ambitious, he was chosen to lead. His command would hold the great host together. Odysseus of Ithaca resisted at first. He feigned madness to escape war. But his trick was uncovered, and he joined. His cunning would prove as sharp as any blade. Ajax the Greater came from Salamis, towering and strong. Ajax the Lesser from Locris, swift but reckless. Achilles of Thessaly, still young, shone like a rising star. Nestor of Pylos, wise and seasoned, answered too. His strength had faded, but his words were precious. He came not as a warrior, but as a guide. Diomedes of Argos, fierce and bold. Idomeneus of Crete, loyal and true. Menestheus of Athens, skilled in order and ranks. Each brought ships, men, and hope for honor. The shores of Aulis soon overflowed with sails. Masts rose like a forest. Warriors filled the sands. Armor gleamed in the sun, and voices echoed over the sea. From Olympus, Zeus watched. He saw the gathering of kings. He saw fate's threads tighten, drawing Greece and Troy together. His silence carried weight. The gathering was not only men's will, it was destiny unfolding. Helen's beauty, Paris's choice, Aphrodite's promise, and the oath sworn in Zeus's name led here. Yet among the kings, rivalries smoldered. Pride mixed with loyalty. Some fought for Helen, others for conquest, others for glory. Unity would soon be tested. Sacrifices were made, altars burned, smoke rose. The gods were called for favor. But though flames rose, the winds remained still. The ships could not sail. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, was said to withhold the winds. The fleet stood trapped at Aulis, ready yet motionless, warriors restless on the shore. Again, Zeus's presence lingered in silence. No war could begin without divine will. The gods, unseen, guided what men could not force. The kings waited. Swords gleamed but stayed sheathed. Ships stood ready but still. The gathering was complete, but the journey had yet to begin. This was the calm before the storm. Kings stood bound by oath, pride, and destiny. They waited to cross the sea, to bring Helen home, to face Troy. And high upon Olympus, Zeus watched. The pieces were set. Fate's game was ready. Soon the first move would be made, and history would change forever. Once the oath of Tyndareus awoke, Greece could not rest. The suitors who once sought Helen now had to fight for her return. The great gathering of kings began. Messengers traveled far and wide. From palace to palace, island to island, they carried the call. Remember your oath. Helen has been taken. Come, defend your honor. One by one, the kings answered. Some came with eagerness, hungry for glory. Others came with heavy hearts, knowing war's cost. Yet all were bound by sworn promise. Agamemnon of Mycenae stepped forward. Brother of Menelaus, proud and ambitious, he was chosen to lead. His command would hold the great host together. Odysseus of Ithaca resisted at first. He feigned madness to escape war, but his trick was uncovered, and he joined. His cunning would prove as sharp as any blade. Ajax the Greater came from Salamis, towering and strong. Ajax the Lesser from Locris, swift but reckless. Achilles of Thessaly, still young, shone like a rising star. Nestor of Pylos, wise and seasoned, answered too. His strength had faded, but his words were precious. He came not as a warrior, but as a guide. Diomedes of Argos, fierce and bold. Idomeneus of Crete, loyal and true. Menestheus of Athens, skilled in order and ranks. Each brought ships, men, and hope for honor. The shores of Aulis soon overflowed with sails. Masts rose like a forest. Warriors filled the sands. Armor gleamed in the sun, and voices echoed over the sea. From Olympus, Zeus watched. He saw the gathering of kings. He saw fate's threads tighten, drawing Greece and Troy together. His silence carried weight. The gathering was not only men's will, it was destiny unfolding. Helen's beauty, Paris's choice, Aphrodite's promise, and the oath sworn in Zeus's name led here. Yet among the kings, rivalries smoldered. Pride mixed with loyalty. Some fought for Helen, others for conquest, others for glory. Unity would soon be tested. Sacrifices were made, altars burned, smoke rose. The gods were called for favor. But though flames rose, the winds remained still. The ships could not sail. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, was said to withhold the winds. The fleet stood trapped at Aulis, ready yet motionless, warriors restless on the shore. Again, Zeus's presence lingered in silence. No war could begin without divine will. The gods, unseen, guided what men could not force. The kings waited. Swords gleamed but stayed, sheathed. Ships stood ready but still. The gathering was complete, but the journey had yet to begin. This was the calm before the storm. Kings stood bound by oath, pride, and destiny. They waited to cross the sea, to bring Helen home, to face Troy. And high upon Olympus, Zeus watched. The pieces were set. Fate's game was ready. Soon the first move would be made, and history would change forever. The Greek fleet stirred at last. Sails swelled, oars cut the sea. and the horizon filled with white masts stretching farther than the eye could see. After weeks at Aulis, the men felt destiny move. Hope mixed with fear. Each wave carried them closer to Troy, closer to fate they could not escape. From Troy's walls, sentries saw shadows on the water. Fishermen and shepherds raised alarms. A sea of ships gathered like a storm upon the horizon. King Priam called his sons and counselors. Hector stood noble and steadfast. Paris, proud yet uneasy, knew his choice had brought this storm to their gates. When the Greeks landed, the sands trembled. Armor gleamed, banners flew, horns sounded, and countless feet struck the shore. Troy's land met foreign steel. Patroclus leapt first from his ship. His courage fulfilled a prophecy. The first ashore would be the first to fall. His name lived in memory. Still, the Greeks pressed on. Camps rose, ships were drawn upon the beach, and Troy felt the weight of Greece upon its soil for the first time. Zeus watched from Olympus. He saw threads tighten, weaving mortals and gods into one design. Yet he hurled no thunder. His silence was patience. Hera's anger burned against Troy. Athena stood with Greece, sharpening their cause. Aphrodite shielded Paris and Helen. Apollo favored the Trojans with his light, but Zeus held the balance. No side would yet claim victory. He allowed the war to breathe, to grow, to follow the path fate had set. The first clashes were small. Arrows flew, shields struck, cries echoed. The war did not yet consume all, but lingered like a fire beginning to spread. 9 years of struggle would follow. Yet here, at the landing, stood the seed. The moment the war became real. No longer words, but living struggle. Each triumph and sorrow fell beneath Zeus's gaze. Mortals believed in choice, but destiny's threads lay in his keeping, woven quietly above. The beach of Troy became a stage. Men would seek glory, suffer loss, and gods themselves would walk among them. Yet all beneath Zeus's sky, as night fell, campfires burned along the shore. Greeks whispered victories and fears. Trojans prepared behind walls for the storm that pressed near. And above them all, Zeus sat silent. He chose no side. He ended no quarrel. He let the wheel of destiny turn without thunder or flame. The war was no longer about Helen alone. It was a living struggle, shaping men and gods alike. At its heart stood Zeus, keeper of balance. The first clash gave way to something greater. What seemed a swift campaign became a long siege. Days turned to months, months to years. Troy's walls still stood tall. The Greeks built camps on the shore. Ships were pulled onto the sand. Fires burned each night. Voices rose with songs and quarrels. Beyond them, Troy remained proud and defiant. 9 years passed in stalemate. Raids struck nearby towns. Allies were called, supplies gathered, but the heart of Troy remained unbroken, its towers watching the plain. The Greeks grew weary. They had come for Helen, but the cost spread far beyond her beauty. Every year carved deeper lines into pride and patience. Zeus watched with patient eyes. The war was more than swords. It was pride, fear, ambition, and spirit, bound to the will of gods and woven into fate's design. Hera and Athena whispered to the Greeks. Aphrodite shielded Paris. Apollo blessed Troy. The quarrels of gods echoed the quarrels of men. But Zeus stood above. He gave no side a swift victory. He let the war endure, for within its years heroes would rise and names would be remembered. The Greeks quarreled. Agamemnon's pride clashed with Achilles' fire. Odysseus counseled with wit, Nestor with wisdom. Yet kings rarely stood in harmony. The Trojans carried their own burdens. Hector, noble and steadfast, guarded his city with love for family and people. Paris, shielded by Aphrodite, stirred unease. Zeus saw it all. Kings in anger, warriors in courage, families in sorrow. He did not silence them. He allowed it, for such was destiny's path. Sometimes Zeus tilted the balance. A storm might scatter ships. A dream might stir a king. His hand was subtle, guiding yet never overwhelming. The war was more than battle. It was a stage where greatness and weakness were revealed. Some sought glory, others only survival. All became legend. At night, fires lined the plain. Greeks dreamed of home. Within Troy's walls, families prayed. Children grew beneath the shadow of war. And above them all, Zeus remained steady. Other gods raged with passion. Zeus chose patience. Where men despaired, he chose silence. 9 years of siege-shaped legends. Achilles, Hector, Ajax, Odysseus' names echoed, each deed unfolding beneath Zeus's gaze. The war endured as Zeus allowed. Troy would not yet fall. Greece would not yet triumph. Fate had more to weave. The siege would go on. The war dragged on, and weariness spread through the Greek camp. Victories came, but they were small. Troy still stood tall, and the Greeks felt time pressing down. Pride soon cut deeper than any spear. Not from an enemy, but from 2 kings. Agamemnon, commander of the host, and Achilles, the fiercest warrior. The Greeks raided nearby lands for supplies. They claimed treasures, cattle, and captives. Among them was a prize Agamemnon kept for himself, a sign of his power. When the gods forced him to return it, his pride burned. In anger, he seized another prize. But this one belonged to Achilles, and the insult struck like fire. The camp grew silent. Achilles felt his honor stripped away. His words cut sharp as blades. He swore he would not fight for Agamemnon, nor for Greece. He withdrew to his tent. His voice, once thunder in battle, turned into silence. Without him, the Greeks trembled, for none could match Achilles' strength. Achilles called upon his mother, Thetis, the sea goddess. He begged her to speak to Zeus, to make the Greeks suffer until they realized their need for him. Thetis rose to Olympus. She knelt before Zeus and pleaded. She asked the father of gods to favor the Trojans, to shift the tide against the Greeks. Zeus sat in silence. Hera, who loved the Greeks, glared with suspicion. To grant the request would bring sorrow, but Zeus listened and gave a slow nod. His decision was balance, not cruelty. The Greeks, divided by pride, would face the weight of their choices. The Trojans would grow strong while Achilles stayed away. The war turned. Without Achilles, the Greeks faltered. The Trojans surged with courage. Fortune shifted, not in thunder, but in momentum, in the breath of Zeus's will. From Troy's high walls, Hector led charge after charge, brave and unyielding. From the Greek camp, Agamemnon wrestled with pride and guilt, trapped in his own fire. Achilles remained apart, his anger cold but unbroken. The war raged, but he watched from silence, waiting. His absence echoed louder than his sword. Zeus watched from Olympus. He had not chosen sides, he had chosen balance. The Greeks would suffer until they saw the cost of pride and division. The quarrel of kings was more than a feud. It was a turning point, shaped not by blade, but by honor, rage, and the steady hand of Zeus. And so, the war went on. Not only between Greeks and Trojans, but within hearts. Destiny tightened its grip, and Zeus allowed it to unfold. The war's rhythm shifted once more. With Achilles withdrawn, the Trojans pressed harder. The plain between ships and city rang with clash and cries of defiance. Zeus looked upon the field. He had promised Thetis her request. The Greeks would feel their weakness. The Trojans would rise until pride and folly revealed their cost. He sent omens across the sky. Eagles wheeled above the plain. Dreams came to kings in the night, urging choices that swayed the course of battle. The Trojans marched with renewed courage. Hector's voice lifted their hearts. They pushed the Greeks back, closer and closer to the wooden walls that guarded their ships. The Greeks trembled. Fires once lit in triumph now flickered with fear. Without Achilles, their spirit weakened. Even their bravest warriors began to doubt their strength. Hera, watching from Olympus, could bear it no longer. She loved the Greeks, and to see them fall stirred her to anger. But Zeus's will was firm and unyielding. The gods quarreled above, as men quarreled below. Yet Zeus stood apart, silent and steady. His choice had been made, and destiny would not be undone. A storm gathered over the sea. Waves crashed against the shore. The Greeks, camped upon the sand, felt the heavens themselves weigh heavy against them. The Trojans pressed forward, their courage rising like the tide. Hector, noble and steadfast, became their beacon. Under Zeus's eye, he shone like a flame in darkness. The Greeks fought, but each step pushed them backward. Their walls shook. Their ships, lifelines to home, stood at risk. The war had turned, and Zeus had made it so. This was no punishment alone. It was a lesson. Pride had divided the Greeks, and now they would feel the cost. Fate moved, and Zeus let it unfold. On Olympus, he remained calm. Other gods burned with passion, but Zeus was patience itself. He was not cruelty, nor kindness, but balance everlasting. And so, the war carried on. The Trojans surged. The Greeks faltered. Destiny's weave grew tighter, each thread bound to the will of Zeus above. The Greeks faced their darkest hours. Without Achilles, they were driven back to the sea. Hector led the Trojans with fire, and the ships stood in peril. In the Greek camp, despair grew like a shadow. Warriors faltered. Kings quarreled. Agamemnon, once proud, felt regret for the quarrel that had torn strength from his army. From Olympus, Zeus watched. His promise to Thetis was fulfilled. The Greeks suffered not by cruelty, but by pride. The gods quarreled, but Zeus remained calm and steady. Agamemnon called his council. He admitted fault, though pride clung to his words. He offered treasure and honor, if only Achilles would return to fight. They chose ambassadors. Odysseus, clever and eloquent. Phoenix, wise and fatherly. Ajax, strong and blunt. Heavy with hope, they walked to Achilles' tent. Inside, Achilles sat apart. His hands were idle, his heart still burning. He welcomed them with courtesy, but anger lingered in his eyes like a storm unbroken. Odysseus spoke first. He warned of danger. He listed Agamemnon's gifts. He pleaded for the ships, for Greece, for families waiting far away. Phoenix followed. His voice carried love. He spoke like a father, begging Achilles to set aside wrath, to think of honor, duty, and the cause they all shared. Ajax stood last. His words were plain. If Achilles stayed silent, men would die, ships would burn, and Greece itself would fall into ruin and despair. Each voice carried truth. Each plea was heavy with weight. Yet Achilles was unmoved. He spoke with fire, saying no treasure could heal the wound of insult. The ambassadors, left in sorrow, their hope turned to ashes. They returned to the camp, burdened with despair, as the Greeks braced for the Trojans' assault. Above them all, Zeus remained steady. He had not ordered refusal. He had not softened hearts. He let destiny's thread unravel as it was woven. The lesson was not yet done. The Greeks would bear the cost of pride a little longer. The Trojans, under Zeus's balance, would continue to rise. The embassy to Achilles was no failure alone. It was a mirror. It showed how pride weakens even the strongest. It showed how men cannot bend fate to their will. Zeus watched with patience vast as the sky. His role was not to erase errors, but to let them bear fruit. Pride, love, sorrow, and glory would ripen in time. And so, the war pressed on. The Greeks weakened. The Trojans grew bold. Achilles remained apart, his wrath unbroken. Destiny moved, and Zeus let it breathe. The war raged by the sea. The Greeks were cornered. The Trojans pressed harder, led by Hector. Fires burned, and battle cries echoed across the shore. Achilles stayed in his tent. His pride was unbroken. Yet Patroclus, his dearest friend, could not bear to watch the Greeks suffer any longer. Patroclus begged Achilles, "Let me wear your armor. Let me lead your warriors. The Trojans will think you have returned. Their courage will falter." Achilles listened. He would not return himself, but his heart softened. He gave Patroclus the shining armor and warned him with solemn words. "Drive them back from the ships," Achilles said. "But do not go too far. Do not face Hector, for it is not your fate to bring Troy down." Patroclus promised, yet fate already stirred. With the Myrmidons at his side, he charged into battle, the armor blazing like the Sunday. The Trojans saw him and trembled. Whispers spread. They thought Achilles had returned. Fear gripped them, and the tide began to turn. Patroclus fought with fire. He drove the Trojans from the ships. He saved the fleet from ruin. Hope rose in the Greek camp once more. From Olympus, Zeus watched. He knew this was no true victory. Patroclus would shine, but only for a brief moment before destiny claimed him. Still, Zeus allowed the triumph. He gave strength to Patroclus's arm. He let him strike down foes with glory, while the threads of fate tightened. Encouraged by Apollo, Hector gathered his men. Noble and steadfast, he stood against the warrior who wore Achilles' armor. The clash shook the plain. Patroclus pressed on, forgetting the warning. Victory blinded him. He reached beyond the bounds of his fate. Then Zeus acted. He let Patroclus feel the weight of mortality. A spear struck. The armor failed. The light that burned so bright began to fade. The Trojans saw the truth. It was not Achilles, but his companion. Hector claimed the moment. Patroclus fell, his spirit silenced on the field. In his tent, Achilles heard. His wrath turned hollow. Grief thundered within him. In losing Patroclus, he lost part of himself. Zeus had not struck the blow. He had not chosen sides. He only let destiny unfold, guiding balance with a steady, unseen hand. The fall of Patroclus was a spark. It would awaken Achilles. His wrath would turn from Agamemnon to Troy, reshaping the war. Every moment had led here. The quarrel of kings, the Greeks' despair, the embassy's failure, now the grief of Achilles, all threads of Zeus's weaving. The war was far from over, but this loss set the stage for its fiercest chapters. The hand of Zeus held steady, letting destiny breathe. Night fell. The Trojans celebrated. The Greeks mourned. And Zeus looked on, as sorrow and glory carried the war closer to its destined end. Patroclus was gone, yet his fall was more than grief. It was the hinge of the story, the spark that would awaken Achilles' return.